And we're recording. Let's go live on YouTube as well. All right, welcome in everyone. I see people rolling in. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us on this busy election night. I know people have lots of commitment today, but to join us, we're really grateful. And then we definitely have a wonderful guest for you guys. So we have Sid Sarasvati with us once again. So last time when I was speaking with Sid, our conversation regarding H1B self-petition, it was really, really successful in terms of how, our audiences like it. And then also we answer some questions for you guys. So today we'll be focusing on EB1. Recently, Sid have a journey of getting his EB1 finally approved. Congratulations on that. And then we're gonna, keep it conversational, but then Sid is he also prepared a presentation for you guys. So we're going to briefly go through the presentations. We wanted to keep this session shorter this time because it's election night. So we might not go 1 hour. We'll probably go 45 minutes today. But if you have any questions coming in, feel free to ask them. But without further ado, I'll get started. All right, today's sessions, we're going to focus on a couple of things. So first of all, how we want to share Sid's journey, how he went from a MSCS students and international students to his H1B, EB2, EB1 applications, and then finally approved. And then we're going to discuss, for those of you who wanted to start your journey applying for EB1, how and when should you start? And then maybe dealing with other people, other resources. Sid is going to offer some of his insight and his experience on that. We're going to have a live Q&A sessions. Half of the session is going to be Q&A. So as I mentioned again, send in your questions and we'll collect them and hopefully answer as much as we can. All right, just to talk a little bit about who we are GoElite. We're located in Los Angeles, Pasadena. We focus on day one CPT university applications, consultations. We also do help out students with F1 reinstatement, emergency transfer, change of status, and stuff like that. Our mission is to help international students succeed in the US. We're certified as ARC and other agencies in the education industry. All right, two exciting announcements that I wanted to briefly share with you. First, we launched our new reward programs. So if you wanted to, I will share the link later, but if you wanted to sign up for this program, join group chat, enroll into university, these all get you points that you can directly get gift card, get cash from them. So definitely feel free to check that out. And then we spent a whole year or maybe even more than a whole year. We wrote a book. So we launched our Red Book for international students in the US. So this book is going to cover everything that you might need: visa, housing, healthcare, work. And this is completely free. So I'll share the link if you're interested, download the book and see if this is helpful. And we're on Google Reviews. Feel free to check us out. We currently have more than 500 5-stars. See what other students rate us. And then we're on all social media platforms. Definitely feel free to check us out as well. I see some messages that people might be sending in the chat. Just feel free to send your questions specifically to the Q&A so that we can put this better in order. All right, without further ado, I will stop sharing, and Sid, you can introduce yourself and then start.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Let us know in chat if you can hear me fine. I want to make sure audio is audible. I can keep the microphone closer to my mouth. But my name is Sid Saraswati. I'm here in Boston, Massachusetts. I've been here in the US since 2010. And like most of you, I came here as a student. And it's been, not very atypical a journey of mine, going from different visas from F1 to CPT OPT, which I'll talk about in my presentation. And what I want to do today was really walk you through my journey from discovering what is EB1, understanding it, and getting over that fear that all of us have, is that do we even qualify for EB1? And for those who don't know, EB1, if you just read about it online, it sounds like you got to have a Nobel Prize or an Olympic medal to even think about it. I'm here to tell you that's not the case. I got it. I am pretty normal of a tech employee. I've been an IC and a manager. I worked my path through various degrees, but I've now seen a lot of my colleagues, few of the people who have tried to develop their profile and go for the EB1 route to secure their green card. So without further ado, let me share my presentation. We can have this engaging. So if you want to put any pressing question in the chat, Ryan, I think you will just gaze through it. Let me know. Feel free to interrupt me.
Absolutely.
And I will also pause during the presentation just to make sure that we are aligned. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, let me know if you can see the first slide. Ryan, all good?
Yes. Yes, all good.
All right, so navigating the EB1, strategies for success. EB1 is also called Einstein visa for strange reasons. And I think one of my purpose for this talk, one takeaway, if I'm successful, is to let you know that it's more of a misnomer than not. And nobody needs to be afraid of taking this path. I have presented this before, but I think it's always worth revisiting my own journey. I think it helps orient me with you guys and give you some context on how I've arrived to where I have. I came in here 2010 as an F1 student, MS in computer science from Rochester Institute of Technology. That was, I did a couple of co-ops there, CPT. Then I got my first job at Vivox on an OPT. I moved from Vivox to Cogito, got my H1B, multiple H1Bs with transfers. Then I filed for my EB2 around 2016. Now, EB2 is your first petition to the US government saying that, hey, I have a temporary work visa and I would like to be a permanent resident. So that's your employer-based or employee-based ask to the government to give you a permanent residency. Now, I would assume a bunch of all of us who are from India and China and other countries who have a country-based quota, even if you get your EB2, you get a priority date and you have now been put into a perpetual backlog, which almost refuses to move. So for people who have their EB2 from 2012 are the one who are being processed by USCIS. And that timeline moves very, very slowly. So since then, I have been on H1B. Around 2019 to 2022 is where I started thinking about other ways of my path to green card. And what was most pressing for me was my desire to start my own company. And being on H1B, as some of you might know or not, it's kind of a very scary thing to think about when you are on H1B visa. There's a lack of guidance and clarity on what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do as an H1B holder pertaining to your work and pertaining to side hustles. And number two, I mean, starting a business is hard anyways. So it's a big risk in life. And you add on the immigration pressure and uncertainty. It really leads you to a lot of frustration. The short story, I have written about it on LinkedIn. I've talked about this, with Ryan and this group, and I have now a whole community of people where I started a company on H1B called Trial and Error. And while I did that, I secured my H1B and hired myself as an employee in my own company. So I transferred my visa through myself, through my entity, and I pursued an EB1 path to secure my green card. So even if I had my H1B, there was no guarantee that I'll ever get a green card because I was stuck on an EB2 timeline. So I'll go in detail about that, but I want to just quickly touch on this timeline. And what I want to do in the next presentation is re-walk through this timeline from the lens of EB1 to show you how I use this very traditional path to make a case for myself. I thought that was the most interesting way for me to present and show you how anybody here can think about their own path and criteria and how USCIS evaluates that. But before I do that, my own path, I started the whole EB1 like evidence collection, strategy, thinking, consulting with lawyers, attorneys, profile development. It took me about 2 years. So August 2022, right here, I did my first evaluation with like paying somebody and trying to understand, hey, where do I stand? I got my first understanding. I took about 1 year to prepare myself to the point where we could file a petition. March 2023, we filed a petition, and just like H1B and O1, there's a premium processing, so you get your answer in less than 15 days. I got an RFE, and in July, I got a denial. So my first EB1 was denied, and this was pretty hard time for me because, like I said, I was starting a company and transferring my H1B, and I was relying on EB1-A to go through. So 1 month of full depression and looking back into RFE, like what exactly they need. It made me dig deeper, and I think blessing in disguise, that RFE and denial really made me grok the system into what exactly did they look for, what is it you could do, what is it you should not do. I filed my EB1-A again in October. So I looked into the denial reasons and I filed it again. And then in about 10 days, that was approved. So once your EB1 is approved, you are allowed to do your adjustment of status. So in January, I filed my I-485, which is telling the government that I want to move my visa status from H1B to a permanent residence because I have my EB1 and my dates are current. And in about November, I got my green card. Okay, now very quickly, what is an EB1? And how does it fit into H1B, O1, and EB2, EB3? So H1B and O1 are temporary work visas. Now an employer, is bringing you to the country and giving you a visa to work in the country and stay in the country. H1B, as I would assume in this call, most of you know, is lottery-based the first time. So the chances are very low at this point that it's about 30% that you'll get a lottery. O1, the advantage is there is no lottery, but there is a higher bar for your eligibility. Now, the good thing about O1 and EB1, the way they connect is the criteria used for O1 is the same criteria used for EB1. So if you are developing your profile for O1, you could think about taking advantage of that all the paperwork and evidence you've done and use that for your EB1 filing as well. Now, to move from temporary work visa to be a permanent resident, you could do an EB2, EB3, or EB1 filing. Now, I don't want to go too much in detail in all of these things as this is beyond the scope of this presentation, but I'm just writing it here to put EB1 in context. What I pursued was EB1-A. There is EB1-B and C. Some are more different than the others, but the most interesting thing about EB1-A is that there is no employer sponsorship required for it. So I could have filed my EB1-A even outside of US as a petition to the government to say that, hey, look, I am an extraordinary person. Here are my achievements. I'm asking you for a green card to come into the country. There is no quota per se, but there is a priority date for green card. And yeah, that's pretty much what EB1-A stands for. So what are the criteria and how do you prove to USCIS that you qualify to get an EB1-A visa? The way USCIS has structured this is that they have outlined a policy and made it public that they want you to look at these 10 criteria that I have in front of you. And they say that you have to meet 3 out of these 10 to qualify for an EB1-A. Okay. So that's the first big demystifying piece of information that I received, because even before I knew about these criteria and in details, EB1-A sounded like, you got to be an extraordinary person and you got to be really, really globally prominent as a person. So when you think of as a vague, prominent thing, nobody is going to come and think like, okay, I am that awesome of a person and I should get EB1. Once you start looking at yourself into these buckets of criteria, then you have more interesting questions to ask, which is, where am I strong? What evidence can I prove in different criterias? What I can develop? And sometimes you dig deep and you don't even know what you're good at because we don't really document ourselves as well as I think most of us would imagine. And definitely for me, there's so much of extracurricular paper, like master's degree research that I did that I did not think would help me, but it actually did help me in my profile building. So I'll go over each criteria and a little bit summary about that. But so far, so good. Any questions, thoughts?
Yeah, we did have one questions that I think interesting, is that this person wanted to know more about what specifically did you learn or what did you do after the first denial in July 23?
Cool. So I'll get to that in the later slide. So let me just save that answer for that slide.
Yeah, everybody, if you have a questions, we're gonna have a dedicated Q&A sessions. We'll answer more general ones, but if you have a questions right now, feel free to shoot that into the Q&A. We're happy to answer them for you.
Okay, so now with that, is EB1-A really possible? That's what I asked around 2021. So first things, you don't need global fame, and you need 3 out of those 10 criteria I showed you. And the key takeaway I would say is that documenting and showing evidence is much greater than just like this quasi reputation that you might think somebody prominent has. So as long as you can prove it, you get an EB1-A. So documentation matters. Now, after my H1B founding journey, writing about it, I started a WhatsApp group and I have a community of about 700 to 800 aspiring founders who are looking for same immigration path, either on H1B or O1. I speak to a lot of people. Now, the most common barrier, the most common misconception, most common barrier is the misconception about EB1 and how you qualify for it. So this is why I want to spend a lot of time on that rather than telling you about each criteria and what how to really excel at it. So I thought the way I would do it is to show you my own path and my own journey from a traditional lens and looking at it from the lens of EB1-A. Okay. So I showed you my path from school to trial and error. Now, what I did here is I tried to break it down again into a little bit of achievements and impact. The thing to highlight here is that this is the step one of your assessment as well. When you think about your own profile, you want to look at in terms of impact in the industry in a way that if you give it to an USCIS reviewer who has no idea about your industry, will that make sense to him or her, right? I mean, if I was in software engineering and I would have assumed that everybody understands that I wrote, a mobile app that does this thing for a company. None of that matters. What matters is, for example, if I could show that mobile app is downloaded by 10 million people in 5 countries in about 1 year. And I look at that data from App Store, I get a screenshot of it, downloads on App Store, and put that as an evidence. That's it, check off, you're done. So that's what evidence collection and your impact matters. And so you have to back it up with screenshots, narrative, press articles, this, that, code samples, all of that through for different criteria. Now, I am in tech, in IT and tech. So I do think for EB1-A especially, A lot of people can have very different strategies, but from my point of view, for tech professionals, I have listed out what I feel and think is most achievable for tech aspiring founders or engineers, managers, something achievable with a little bit of effort, something that's less common. I think I'm going to talk about a little bit each one of them, what they mean. So the first one is original contribution. Now, what in the tech world, what people are looking for is that imagine you are a software engineer for a company. What architecture did you build, let's say in cybersecurity, and what did that enable for the business? And what was so original about it? So the most prominent evidence you could give is a patent, right? Because patent itself is a certification by the government that you have an original contribution. Now, if you have that, you have a slam dunk at original contribution. So you could just go for that criteria and that's met. So you got 1 out of 3. I did not have that. And I guess this is one thing I did not even know during my career, that how important it would be to get a patent. So if you guys are early in your career, go for it. Get a patent so that tomorrow you could file an EB1 and get one criteria done. Everything extracurricular matters. Press, article about you from a company that has your name in it. You can collect all of those evidence from 10 years ago and present that in your application today. So for my case, you could show your impact through metrics. So I built a mobile app that was used by millions of people, and that actually solved an e-commerce problem of making grocery delivery that used to take 2 hours. It made that 10 minutes. So it was a last mile problem. So I made a narrative about it, how it solved it. And I had to show that how I played a key role in that solution. So a lot of tech companies have very innovative solutions. So if you are working on a project that works for you, you can build a narrative, get reference, and try to make an original contribution case for yourself. Leadership role. If you have a role that's significant in a country, in a company. I worked for very small startups in the beginning. I worked for big companies as well. Now you could use anything from the past as well. It doesn't have to be a current role. So for leadership role, in my case, I moved from being a software engineer to director and VP. I used a couple of evidences in different companies where I was in one small company, I was at a director level. So I could say how significant my role was. Alternatively, if you're a director at Facebook, right, or Google, it might not have that much of impact as a leadership role, because they see how big the company is and what the hierarchy is, what the org structure is. So it's a lot of this is case making that your attorney will make to show that you had a leadership role in a company and how impactful that company is.
Sorry to
There's
interrupt. What about, I guess some of the audience come from overseas, right? What about they have a very significant role, but from an overseas company? Could that count?
100%. Yeah, totally counts. So that's a good question. Thank you for asking. I should have clarified. None of this is US, has to be US based. Nothing about EB1-A. Like I said, you could file it from China or India. You could have a significant role. Now, you do have to prove that your role was significant and the company was significant as well, backing by metrics. Revenue is a great metric for a company, for example, right? Published material is basically press coverage. So let's say you had a TechCrunch article that has your name talking about you. That's a slam dunk for published material because TechCrunch is a very well reputed publication. You have to prove TechCrunch is reputed by showing data about traffic, website traffic. The days are now online, right? I guess back in time, you had to show newspaper. Everything doesn't have to be newspaper. It can be an online publication, but you back it up by traffic. And you can develop that as well. Now, just quickly, you can develop judging as a criteria. For tech, judging means if you're a judge of a hackathon, or you go and voluntarily apply to be a judge in a lot of these judging competitions that are online, you can develop this profile. Scholarly articles is if you have master students, I don't know, like I wrote a white paper, I have an IEEE paper, I had one that I wrote in 2011, and I was very upset about it because my professor made me do it. So 12 years after that, I can't thank her enough that she made me do it because I used that as an evidence and it worked for me. Then I wrote a little bit more in 2 years. I tried to get some scholarly articles out. And high salary is a very objective criteria. If you are in the top percentile in your region for your role, let's say you are a manager of um, product manager or IT manager, and you can say that my salary in Boston is in top 10%. You qualify for that criteria. So it's very objective. You have to show your W-2, your paycheck, and show the basic salary for the area. Then there are awards, professional association, artistic exhibitions, commercial success in arts. As you can see, they turn more towards artists. Um, you could use it. Awards can be used. Some of the founders use it. If you have a VC funding in your company, you could use that as an award. So that's a very common thing that people in the Bay Area do for their EB1 profile. Right? A VC funding is an award to you. Cool. Okay, so now, again, now we know about this criteria. This is again my profile through the lens of EB1. So what I did is I look at everything I've done and I try to put them into, okay, so what is my impact? What is this company really, right? You have to dig very deep into your own profile because if you think about it, you have to brag about yourself, right? It's not easy. It's not easy to speak highly of yourself. Look, I've done this, my impact is that. So that's one thing you have to get used to when you're writing this case for yourself and you back it by data. So for example, I worked for a company called Joker that went from starting to a unicorn status in 8 months. And I had a significant role in that company and it got $480 million just as funding. So just putting that as an impact has a huge boost for me to be associated in that company. And then I could show and build a narrative of how I played a key role as a leadership person and as original contributor in that company's success. So we got some awards that early on I almost forgot about it until I started building my profile. I realized, oh my God, we actually had an award that I could use for my evidence. Similarly, I worked for Compass that went from, like my own team went from 5 to 60. It had from a private company, it had an IPO, very successful. At Cogito, I did a couple of projects that were DARPA funded. We worked on AI and advanced platforms. And RIT, I had a good GPA of 4.0. I had one publication. That's company based. But overall, you have to have an industry recognition and impact. You have to show that how are you valuable to your industry. The way you do that is, through recognition. And let me go deep into that in a different slide. This is the one I've tried to make, and this is my view of it. This is not one. People can have different ways of thinking about the EB1 narrative. But what I understood from the way things work is you have to have a core impact into a narrow field. So if you just go and say that I am a great engineer, I think that's harder to prove than saying that I am a high impact software engineer with a great focus in generative AI, which is what I used. So the more narrow you go, the easier it is for you to collect evidence and prove that all of that evidence talks about your expertise in that specialized field. So specialization good, generalization is harder. Then you try to build your narrative around business impact, leadership, and technical excellence. So the same picture for me, looked like the following. I focused on software engineering with focus on generative AI. Now, impact-wise, one of the companies had 800 million plus valuation, and I was VP of engineering there. So all of this ties up together. So I showed my leadership, the impact of the company, original contribution and I was leading the development of a mobile app that's used across, 5, 6 countries with 2.5 million users. I could prove my compensation was, high in given in my title and my location. So all of that matters. And I did some judging for cybersecurity. I had technical papers and press coverage. Bringing it all together is what gets you a cohesive strategy and try to target those 3 out of 9 criterias to build a profile. Now, by the way, in case you guys are wondering how big of a case making EB1 looks like, if you would be, I don't know if you're surprised or not, if you know about it, but my own document with evidence collection and everything was about 700 pages. So in case you're wondering what that looks like, it's 700 pages it's a book on your life. Okay. So sure, your lawyers and attorneys will help you. I mean, you don't have to write everything. A lot of that 700 pages is just evidence and collections of articles about the company, proving everything, right? It's a lot of this is you have to understand how law works. Law is all about evidence. So even if you say that I was this in this company for this period, every word has to be proven by an evidence. So you have to provide evidence for it. So I'm gonna go to pitfalls and I guess 8:30. So I'm gonna quickly go to the next 3 slides. I wonder if there's any questions so I can understand how people are thinking about this and where I should focus more.
Yeah, definitely. I think people are more leaning towards qualification and compensation. They're more interested in compensation in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I guess it definitely depends on the areas. But then how do they research, for example? How do they know?
Oh, yeah. So very easy. Compensation is actually easy to research. You can go to online tools that gives you compensation for a location. I think there's payscale.com. So even if you go to payscale.com, you see the salary for let's take a title, for example, software engineer. Now, in a small town in Boston, software engineer might be 110 or 20 or 40, right? Depends. But if you can prove through evidence, hey, look at the pay scale, look at my W2, I'm in top 5%. It's a very objective proof. Now, funny enough, I tell you a good story on that. My first denial, EB1, believe it or not, got denied on the compensation side. And the reason it happened was not that the compensation was, they said that, no, it's not high enough or something. In my denial, they said, I gave my tax returns and my W2 to prove my compensation for year X. And the evidence collection, we went to pay scale and we collected the compensation for year Y.
Hmm.
So the denial said that, hey, you are saying that you're high salary, but the evidence you're saying that to match your compensation for a different year. So they just denied it. So that was my lesson in saying that, that's just, that was sloppy work.
And this is also one of attendees' questions. So he or she wanted to know that does that qualification of the compensation needs to be current, or can it be a previous compensation, for example, that I earned the most?
Oh, previous.
years
It can be
ago?
previous. Yeah, 100%. In fact, the junior you are, the better it is, right?
Right.
So, like in my case, I had a VP of engineering, so it became really hard. I actually used my engineering manager salary just so that I could use that engineering manager and use a higher salary to show that. So I
Hmm.
had a W2 for that year, and I could show that as an evidence. And it could be outside of US as well. You have to prove it, right? What evidence can you give to USCIS to prove that I live here? Here is my title. Anytime in last 10 years, here is how much everybody else made. This is why I am telling you that I was in the top tier of my field, right? Because I got paid so much. That's what you're proving. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of pitfall, I told you one about documentation. I would just say it took me 2 years to collect the evidence, and even I had to dig long way in the past to find out things I've done and things I've forgotten. Uh, for those of you who are early in your career, and if you are in India and China, EB2 is going to be locked. So you will have to think about O1 and EB1 as a strategy at some point. So start collecting evidence as soon as possible. Like just start making sure that you know what you're doing, your success in industry. Um, and if you're working and if you are part of a big project, make sure if your company is doing a press release, if they could mention your name, that goes a long way, right? Because you can't just say that I worked in a project, there's a press release about your company, but it doesn't have your name in it. Because it's harder to prove, right? Then you need a letter from the CEO to say that yes, 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 Ryan instead worked on. But it's better if you have your name. Somehow it is a small just name, and that will just work as evidence. So try to have those extracurricular things in your career as much as you can, which people can see as a public profile. Then for support letters, a generic support letter, I would say, is a common mistake. You want to have very specific and detailed evidence letters. You would need 5 recommendation letters, roughly 4 or 5 from people who are experts in your field to kind of like sign you off, saying that, yep, we know who this person is and they are expert in the field. Now, in my case, you know, yeah, I've been in here 15 years, so I knew people, but that thing takes time. Recommendation always like you to reach out to people. So you have to start thinking about that, create relationship with your CEOs and CTOs and whoever high VP person is in your career. Just make sure you have good relationship because you would always want to get back and get evidence from them. Now, the strategic approach I would say is that if you try to fit into all criteria and try to put evidence in everything, I think you will most likely be stretched too thin. Focus on your strongest 3 or 4. I applied for 5 criteria. So that was the evidence, that was the strategy given to me, thinking about it. And so I did 5 and I got my denial. So I know what got approved. But once I got approved, they don't tell you how many did they approve. I just got an approval letter. Okay, so in the interest of time, I would just say that this is just before the presentation, I just sketched out a few things saying what a strategic profile building could look like, right? You want to start off with your own assessment. You want to build your profile. And when I say build your profile, you dig deep into your past, understand the criteria, you go to all 10 criteria, in a spreadsheet, you say, okay, I'm strong here, I'm weak here, I'm weak here, I'm super weak here, I'm super strong here. So you get an idea where you stand, and then you look at what can I do to stand out, to really prove the evidence? Can I do something in 1 year that will make me excel in those things? And yeah, so press coverage, metrics, KPI, I guess each one will take me half an hour to go into if I get into that right now. But I think it'll be more interesting, Ryan, if you think, I think we take questions, but this is my last slide. Um, the H1B thing I didn't talk about for this call is I started the company on H1B. That's why I got the domain h1bfounders.com. This is actually a paradox. You can't be a founder on H1B. So I thought this was very funny to have this domain. So this is a community that has now grown to more than 700 people. I'm directly involved with a lot of people because it's about 700 and I can manage that. But if you go to h1bfounders.com, I started a newsletter and a Substack. So you can sign up. I usually post there and try to help me, and the group itself is awesome because all of them are aspiring founders who are trying to run a business or start a business on H1B, figuring out path to immigration. So a lot of business talks, a lot of understanding about E-Verify or this and that. We do a good job there. And my goal would be eventually to actually offer more of my time with either guidance and coaching. So I do want to start off like a course at some point where I'll just guide through how I did my H1B self-sponsorship, start a company, and just general business, bootstrapping a business. That's one area I feel like I would have helped me a lot if somebody had given me like a game plan. So let me pause here. Uh, Over to you, Ryan. Let me know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sid. I think this is wonderful information. We all take some time to process, especially under this busy time, election night. So thank you so much for coming up on this and sharing these information. And without further ado, we'll start with the Q&A. All right. So we did answer some of the questions, so they're not included. But if you have any follow-up questions that you also wanted to ask, scan the QR code. We'll connect you with Sid. So this person, let's ask this in a more general way. So if I'm not in tech, if I'm in other industries, I have over a couple years of experience in the big four well-known companies. And what strategy do you recommend, like in general, do you recommend people in finance to build a profile for
Yeah,
EB1A, or if they're not qualified, then build a profile for EP2 NIW? I guess you also research on that at a certain point of your life.
sure. Yeah. So first of all, EB1A, EB2, and IW, separate things. So EB2 and IW, go for it if you haven't had your EB2 yet, because you need to have a EB2 to perpetually extend your H1B or whatever visa you're on. So you should go for that. No brainer to me. Now, EB1A for you, strategy wise, is no different than what I showed you. Now, I say tech, sometimes it confuses people who are not in tech, thinking as if tech is something special. It's not. It's actually worse for a lot of reasons, which is you actually have a very low impact in tech companies, by the way. And if you're a software engineer working for a big tech firm, like your impact is really not much. You're an engineer in a team. So don't think tech has something special. You could make your case, be extraordinary in a very specialized field. So step one for you is, what is it, your core extraordinary skill, which I showed you in a slide, right? So what is that? And then you start building out, branching out, and based on your experience, however you could prove it.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to number two. Do you have an estimation of the difficulty levels?
Yeah.
I guess this is more of a personal view,
Yeah.
but let's just hear it.
Well, no, go ahead. You have a personal view.
And, no. I mean, I guess everybody have their own standard. But for
Oh,
example,
yeah.
me, I guess NIW is gonna be easier in a way compared to like
Yeah.
an EB1A. But then if you go into the specifics, you will find out like each criteria sometimes could be different. So we do recommend you to, for example, to research just a little bit more. And then I think this call in particular is very helpful. So if you wanted to rewatch some of the parts, it really help you understand what EB1A is.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say EB1A and B, you can think of that same. The EB1B, it's the friends that I have who have done it. Like, for example, I'm in Boston. There's a lot of, it's a biology hub. So my own wife, she is, a PhD in biology. So I actually thought EB1 means PhD. That was my understanding of EB1 as a group. I did not know EB1A, B, and all that before I dove into it. So EB1B, I think a lot of PhD and postdocs, research academics, they do it and they get sponsored because you have a lot of articles and sponsored. You have like research papers to you. EB1A is extraordinary skills, which you could show outside. You don't have to have a PhD for it. So it depends on what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So third, I'm on H1B right now. I'm planning to file EB2 NIW, then later eventually an EB1. So how does that sound to you? Is that similar to your path? What do you recommend?
Oh, of course, that sounds amazing. You should definitely get an EB2. Now, I'll tell you one amazing fact, which will thrill you, which is once you get an EB2, you get a priority date, right? A date to Egyptian status. Then you file your EB1. You can port your EB2 priority date to your EB1. So EB1 also has a little bit of backlog now. But if you get your EB2, if you had your EB2, let's say 5 years ago, and you get your EB1 next year, that 5 year ago priority date is what applies to EB1. So go for EB2 right now. Don't even wait for it.
Right. This is a great point because we're not trying to advise everybody that you have to go for EB1 or
Yeah.
nothing. You have to start somewhere, and if you're eventually qualified for EB1, you can always just apply, and then
Yes.
with that, it's wonderful that you have some of the backlogs solved already. So, all right, the next question. I'm on OPT, so I'm pretty new to this, and business background, co-founder. Can I do O1 while waiting for the EB3? I guess you touched on O1. You has
Yeah.
I think you do have the knowledge for O1. Let's see, for this situation.
I mean, if the question is, can I do O1? Like, why not? Yeah. I mean, O1 is an employer. So somebody has to sponsor. You have to say that, hey, uh, I have this role, and it's the same 10 criteria, by the way, that I showed you for EB1A. It's just they're more lenient on O1. You don't have to write a, crazy amount of evidence, but you go through the same thing, membership, judging, high salary, published materials and all that. You have to do a profile. So O1 is a little high bar than H1B, but the good thing about O1 is that you don't have to have a salary. There's no salary requirement, like a minimum, you have to pay this much money to get the visa. So that's the advantage of O1, and especially good for founders.
Yeah, I know everybody. We all wanted to watch the election. What is
Yeah.
remaining? So I think we have a couple more questions. I think one way to do this is that, Sid, if we can answer just, how many more that you can take, and then we will transfer some of the students. We'll send them a group link. They can join the link, and then later on they can consult with you on
Sure.
particular questions. So how do you want it to do this? Like 5 more minutes, maybe?
Yeah, I think if when people are curious, I want to be fair to everybody. So people who have joined. And so let's just do
Sure.
3, 4 more questions.
Okay, let's do 3 more. All right. So what are the differences between EB1A, EB2, and NAWs? Just give us like I don't want it to
Yeah.
force you into being a legal
Yeah.
expert in that
Right.
point.
Thank
But
you.
just explain that in like a, if explain that in like a general way, like everybody
Yeah.
could understand.
So look, let's take a path of you being here, F1 student, right? You get your OPT. What do you do next? You want to get your H1B, or you could do your O1, one or the other. Now, there's a limit to H1B, which is 6 years. So what do you do after 6 years? You got to file for permanent residency. You got to do something to live in the country, right? So you file for EB2 or EB3. EB2, EB3, one requires a master's degree, one does not. Easy, right? So you go for EB2. You will get it if you have a master's degree. Cases are very rare that you will not get it. But the problem is EB2 has a quota system. So if you're from India and China, you will get your EB2. Everything is good. You're amazing, but you'll never get a green card because they'll say that it's a big wait list. So you got to move you're standing in a line of EB2, you got to move yourself from EB2 line to EB1 line. EB1 has a smaller line or no line. 2 years ago, the line is much faster. So that's the difference between EB2 and EB1. It's just that how much do you have to wait for your green card? EB2 NIW and EB2 is still EB2, but one is national interest waiver, which means you can sponsor it yourself. You don't need your employer to do it for you. But either ways, you will get your EB2 and you will be waiting on a line.
Absolutely. And I think this partially answers the next question, which is about EB2 and then EB1. So this person is curious, why did you stop EB2 and then started to pursue an EB1A instead? I guess one of the main reasons is that timing's sake, that you can save a lot of time with EB1, but we do want to hear from your end, from your side of the story.
I didn't stop EB2. So my EB2 was filed and I got it like in 2016, but my visa was H1B because until I get my EB2 current, I cannot change my visa status. I'm still on H1B. So I was just lifelong an H1B person, right? For like 10, 15 years, you just keep renewing your H1B. That's the path of most people now, which is why I think this EB1 topic has so much interest because it's a big backlog problem. So I didn't stop my EB2, but I had my EB2 and I could file my EB1, say that, hey, I think I'm more qualified now. So, hey, USCIS, you want to move me to EB1A criteria? That's the kind of ask you're making the government.
Yeah, absolutely. This next question circles back to our last sessions, but we can still touch on this just a
Yep.
little bit. Before you transfer your H-1B to your own company, did you need to prove that you didn't work for the company?
I don't need to. That's why would I prove something that like that's think about it, right? What am I like? That's like saying, first of all, working for a company without H-1B is not allowed, right? So that's out of compliance. So the question means, did you prove that you were out of compliance? No. Why will I prove that? Right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I was a founder of the company, and being a founder is totally legal on H-1B.
Yeah, if you're interested in learn more about H1B founders, you can go to h1bfounders.com. You can also go to GoElite's YouTube channel. We posted a lot of videos on our last session with Sid. Definitely very informational, and feel free to check that out. And I want to thank you so much. I think we're coming to an end. Everybody wanted to spend some time to watch the early elections. Everybody,
Well, I know.
we're
I would
all a
have.
part of this, even though even some of us didn't vote. So let's see. But we're gonna just a little plug. We're gonna also have a session on Thursday with an immigration attorney. We're gonna go just a little bit on the election result and also possible impact as well. So if you're interested, sign up from the same website, goelite.com/events, and then we'll see you on Thursday. I want to thank you so much, Sid, for coming
Of course.
today. And then everybody, if you did have a good time learning about EB1A, if you think this is helpful, let us know. We're definitely open to have more sessions on this particular topics. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sid, especially for coming on. And hopefully we'll see you in the future.
Bye, everybody, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.